I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House.
And I'm Devyn Caldwell from Our Philly Row. We're the hosts of True Tales from Old Houses.
Hi, Devyn.
Hi, Stacy. How are you?
Well, good. That's a loaded question. You may not have heard, but we've just recently had an election here.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted. I'm just ready to sleep. What have you been working on at your house? I know we're all kind of looking for ways to distract ourselves while this is all getting worked out in the background.
Well, actually, I've been working on my stained glass. I mentioned in a previous episode that I had started the hobby of stained glass.
Right.
I've been devoting some time to it. I've been making different pieces. I'm not trained in this, so I'm teaching myself. And thank goodness for a lot of YouTube videos because there's a lot of really helpful information out there. But it's exciting and I'm having a lot of fun with it and I'm exploring with it. And and coincidentally, today's guest is very involved in stained glass as well in a very different way. But more about that to come.
Right. And I'm curious. Well, okay. So first of all, is it a chicken or an egg situation? Like, I can't remember. Were you already into stained glass before we had our conversation with our guest? Was it just sort of coincidental?
It was coincidental. It started a while back, but I got serious in August. And it was the end of August that I bought all of the equipment to do it. And then it took another 5 weeks to get everything set up. And so now I've been set up for a month and I've done 6 things. Yeah, something like that.
That's neat.
We'll get there. Maybe we'll put some of it on the show notes, a couple pictures of some of what I've done so far.
Yeah, I'd really like to see it. I haven't seen it either yet, so that'd be great. Here I'm working on the living room, which basically involves painting and repainting and then repainting some more because I have changed my mind so many times. But it's good. Our living room is a really beautiful space. It has so much potential, but I feel like we you can tell it's the first room we ever worked on when we moved here. One of the first rooms.
Well, because it was green.
Yeah, so green and mildewy wallpaper, just the nature of having an old house that sat empty for a while. But it's, I can see the places where I think, I would have repaired the plaster a little bit differently there. Or I can see where I painted and maybe cut some corners. And I remember I was taking my time with it. So we did use oil-based primer on everything. Thank goodness we did that the right way. But I remember going somewhere, I don't remember where it was. And Andy just got a little bit tired of waiting. So he went in and did a bunch of painting too. And it's very funny. You can kind of see where, I don't know, it's good to go back and see how far you've come. How's that? Yeah. Maybe that's all I can leave it at that. We have learned a lot in the last 6 years, 6.5 years. But I was thinking about it, in just a couple weeks, it'll have been 7 years since we packed up our entire lives and moved all the way across country.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a weird anniversary for me because I still miss California so much, but I think of the opportunities that I've had because we came here, and that feels nice too. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we do have an announcement. We have one announcement right now, and do you want to take it away?
Sure. I'll go ahead. So we are 2 weeks into our fall fundraising merchandise event. And you only have 1 more week to get in on this. We are offering super soft unisex t-shirts and hoodies and a ladies cut v-neck, all in heathered navy blue. The details are on the website, truetalesfromoldhouses.com. And we've posted photos in our Facebook group and on the Instagram page. And all the links to the pre-order page will be there as well.
Yeah, definitely. So we have had quite a few pre-orders. Thank you to everyone who's already reserved. Gosh, their t-shirt or hoodie. That means a lot to us. November 16th is the deadline for reserving merchandise. So put that on your calendar. Go ahead and submit your order. You have 1 more week. And if you aren't interested in merchandise, which I get, but you would still like to support the show, then you are welcome to still make a one-time or reoccurring donation over on the website as well. So we usually talk about that during the commercial, but today this is the commercial.
Yeah.
We're doing it now. We won't interrupt the show again. We're just going to remind you about these wonderful t-shirts and hoodies over and over again.
And the proceeds from the merchandise run and your donations, they go directly to the cost of producing the show. They cover like sound tech, hosting fees, software, that sort of thing.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That is really the only announcement we have today. And thank you so much for everything that you do for the show when you share it with your friends and followers. Just telling other people about the show, all of those things are so beneficial and keep True Tales from Old Houses going. So thank you very much.
We really appreciate it.
Today's question and answer is actually something that we asked one of our guests on an episode that's coming up. It's a future episode. But I wanted to know your answers, Devyn, so I thought I could ask you the same thing, and then you could ask me.
Sure. Go for it.
Okay. The question that we ask is, or the question I want to ask you, Devyn, is, it's two questions, actually. The first is, what is one product or method from the past that you'd like to see offered or used again? And then the flip side of that question is, what is a modern product that you're happy to use instead of its historic predecessor?
So that's a really good question. I have to say the very first thing that came to mind for the product or method from the past, and there's a reason why it's not available anymore, but I would have to say the old school toxic paint strippers that were out there, which I there's health issues and reasons why they're not available, and they're carcinogenic and all of that, but they were really effective. You talk to people who've been around for a long time, and they will tell you how much easier it was to strip paint back in the day when they could use these chemicals. So I would like to see them brought back again. However, I think it's a matter of education, because in reality, commercial applications are still used. Companies who do the services will still use them, not like on site, but like in their own facility. Dip and strip places will use these chemicals, but
Right.
they're just not available to the public. And if there was a way that the public could use them with education, it would be great. But I guess that's not going to happen, because unfortunately, there's always going to be those who are not going to use them correctly.
Right.
So the modern product that I'm happy to use instead of a historic product would be LVL beams. That's laminated
Veneer, right?
Thank you. Laminated veneer lumber. That's it. I don't know why I struggle with that. So when we had some structural work done in our house, we had some sagging of floor joists, and they had to sister in the beams, and they used these LVLs, which were much more structurally sound. And and they were more expensive, but by doing this, they were able to jack up the floor like an inch and a half, level it off, and we know it's not going to go anywhere. And I have to say that LVL lumber, because you don't really see it, it's hidden behind plaster or sheetrock,
Right.
is structurally is just much better than traditional like wood beams. And not to mention the fact that who can afford to have actual wood, wood beams? Like it's not reasonably affordable.
So what makes LVL LVL? I know it's laminated veneer lumber, but what does it look like? Is it thinner, denser?
As I understand it, it's kind of like a beam made the same way they make plywood, which is layers of wood that are veneered where the grains are crisscrossed on each layer, except instead of a piece of plywood, it's made into a beam. And therefore, it just has a lot more structural integrity. It doesn't shrink and grow with humidity the same way.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it's just much more rigid and solid. And that's one area where, as much as I love old houses and I'm always amazed by how well built houses were, there are some modern products where they're just superior.
And for old houses too, it's generally sometimes, that was vague. It is typically old growth versus new growth lumber too. So
Right.
something like an LVL makes a lot of sense. Interesting. Let's see. So I guess I have to answer the question too. And something that I would want to bring back. I don't know, probably more copper. I love the use of copper in a lot. I mean, it's purely decorative in a lot of ways, but it was more standard, I guess, to just kind of either, what do you call it when you put it over metal? When you, like if you have something brass and then you put copper over it, what is that called?
Oh, it's not a veneer.
No. Copper veneer. We can make up a new word. Copper veneer. Oh my gosh.
Copper
I can see
coated,
it.
copper. I
Yeah.
know, I can too.
Plated.
And
Copper plated.
Yes,
Copper
that's
plated.
the word, plated.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. There you go. Oh my gosh. Somebody give me a nap stat. I need a nap. So anyway, yeah, I missed like things like copper plating, copper gutters, that kind of thing. I mean, I get it. It's so not cost effective. But I was in downtown Buffalo probably about, I don't know, 3 months ago or something, maybe even 4 months ago. And they were actually redoing an old building and they were putting copper underneath the balconies. And it was so beautiful. And I don't even know what this building is. You know, it was almost it was a very surprising choice because it almost felt like not a nothing building. Every building is important, but it didn't feel like, oh, this is a luxury apartment or this is a law office. It just felt like, hey, let's fix up this building. And since we're here, let's put copper. And I just thought that is so gorgeous, so pretty. And I mean, people around here do use it for guttering still, but usually those houses are well out of my price range.
Yes, that's true. It also depends upon where you live because you also have to be concerned about people stealing your copper.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's so not practical, but I think it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
I probably should have given this more thought because that is kind of a silly thing to wish. Like if I have all these choices and I pick, oh, can we just have some copper, please?
I don't know. I think it's beautiful. We have a lot of, quite a few row houses in Philadelphia that have like copper bays. And, you know, when the copper turns to that incredible like green and then towards the brown, it's timeless and it just adds to it.
Mm-hmm. As far as a modern product that I'm happy to use, I would say modern paints. I am thrilled with modern paints. I know that maybe they don't wear as long as the old lead-based offerings or even linseed paint, but the cleanup, the fact that they have low to zero VOCs, I am on board with that. Perfectly fine with modern paints.
Yeah.
Easy to tint, so many different color choices, kind of an endless options with modern paint, and no regrets there. I'll happily use a modern paint. That's it. That's my answer. That's all I got.
That's a good one.
If you have a question you would like for us to answer on the show, please head to our website, truetalesfromoldhouses.com, and there is a form that you can submit right there on the homepage. Today's guest offers a new perspective. This is another window episode, but before you say another window episode, hold on, because our guest Richard Cann has a completely different perspective. He hails from the UK, and he rescues and salvages stained glass windows to sell as art pieces or replacement sashes.
My name is Richard Cann, and I am based in the London Borough of Harrow. And I rescue old window glass from all over Britain.
That's wonderful.
I have been excited about this interview all week, no joke. Like the buildup has been pretty big.
Yeah.
I know we've planned this for months, and thank you for being here. It's wonderful to have you.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to it as well, because after the UK, the United States is my biggest market group. It has been for a long time. So I'm always interested to interact in whatever way I can.
Right. That's interesting. Intriguing, too. We'll get back to that, sure.
So, Richard, we've done several window episodes on the podcast, but we're really interested in your English perspective. What's happening to old windows in the UK? Are they removed as often as they are here in the US?
Yeah, I mean, just like you, we've got old houses. And we've had the same mentality since the 1970s that it would be a good idea to strip out old wooden windows from beautiful houses and replace them with plastic toy windows. You call them vinyls, we call them PVC. But what I thought your listeners might find really interesting is that not only were our windows wooden, but they were made with very interesting types of glass. A lot of it is stained glass, and perhaps later we can talk about what I really mean by stained glass. But what it all has in common is that it's not made anymore. It was discontinued from production decades ago because, like most of our manufacturing industry in Britain, it's dead now. And this glass is, what it has in common is that it has different textures. Even if it's not coloured, it's not stained. There were hundreds of different types of glass which were patented, and it's usually put together in a window panel, which we in the trade call leaded lights. And most British people won't know what a leaded light is, but again, it's referring to the fact that it's just glass held together in a lead structure, because it may not be stained glass, but the glass will be very interesting. And often, well, most of the time, these leaded lights, these window panels, will be in wooden window sashes, which make them great for exporting to the USA. Well, anywhere around the world where people care. Now, so since the 1970s, as I say, we've been stripping these out of houses around Britain, so there aren't that many left. Now,
are you stripping them out for the same reasons that, or the same quote reasons that we do in the US for energy efficiency and such? Is that the main reason why, or are people just not interested in the decor anymore?
Both, really. I mean, we're, as a country, I just say what I think, Stacey. A double glazing salesman comes along and tells you, oh, that's not energy efficient. The crazy thing is now, and I'm sure it's the same in your country, the window companies now are taking out plastic toy windows which were fitted in the 80s. So they're not even replacing wooden ones anymore, because they only last about 30 years.
Right, right.
That's why they call it the replacement window industry, is because they need to replace the windows.
Right, right.
Now, let me stop you again real quick. Sorry, just for a second, because I want to say, I mean, UK, we talk about here in the US, we talk about old houses. But when we're talking about the UK, I mean, you are next level old. I mean, you have houses that are 400 years old, older than that. Here we're talking about maybe up to 200 years might be exceptionally old, but it's a different story there.
Where I normally take rescue or windows from are from houses that were built from the late Victorian period to the 1960s. I mean, yes, you can get older houses, but they've got to be structurally fit for people to live in. As I say, it was that period between sort of a hangover from the arts and crafts movement, when people wanted something sort of from the medieval period, that sort of design in their houses. So it's domestic stained glass I deal in mainly. And again, when we talk about different types of stained glass, we could talk about churches and cathedrals. Let's
go there.
But from a commercial point of view, it is old houses that I'm taking from the late Victorian period.
You talked about there are differences in stained glass, and I'd love to hear some of those and different types. Go for it.
Sure. Well, a while ago, you had somebody called Rhonda on, and
yes,
she started by saying, she inferred that there are so many different types of stained glass. Really, this term is used generically for all sorts of things.
Sure.
Now, the stained glass you've got on your show notes, that is that color is made at the point of production. Okay, it's a chemical compound process. For instance, if green glass, to get that color, you would add copper. And an interesting fact is, original pure red glass was made with gold.
Wow.
So that is the color there is made don't ask me how exactly it's done. But then the other more traditional stained glass is when the glass has been painted onto after it's been made, and it's been kiln fired. And perhaps the true definition of stained glass is when silver nitrate has been added to it. And they started doing this around the 14th century. That's what gives the unique sort of yellowy brown color. So to give a sort of cliche example, if you look at, especially in churches and cathedrals across Europe, there will be halos around saint figures, and that's the silver nitrate. Okay, so some people will say that is the true definition of stained glass. Now, the glass I commonly take out of houses is coloured glass, the type Rondo uses, and your guest Leanne.
Oh yes, Lady on Chestnut.
Yeah.
That huge window, that is all what I would call coloured glass, because it has to be affordable, and that's the reason why there's so much of it was made. But to actually be painting every single pane of glass and kiln firing it, that takes a long time. So in houses, as I said, from the Victorian period onwards, there would quite often be a mixture of both, what I call coloured glass and some little elements of painted glass. For instance, in the middle of Victorian doors, it would be typical to have a painted picture of a bird or a plant, and the rest of it will be just coloured glass around it.
Sure. So let me make sure that I understand this correctly. Colored glass would be painted on and kiln fired, and then you're talking about true stained glass might be made during the chemical process, and maybe a combination of both types of glass would be used in some of these older pieces. Is that correct?
No, I think we've got that mixed up.
Okay, let's try again.
So painted glass is what some people would call true European stained glass.
Gotcha.
Okay, they've painted it on, it's been hand fired, and silver nitrate has been added. And that tends to be more expensive.
Okay.
What I call coloured glass is when the colour is made at the point of when the glass is actually made. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So which one would be, colored glass that you're calling, where they do it when they create the glass? You're saying that would be the oldest type. Is that correct?
No, it could.
No.
I mean, it's all a chemical process, so it's not about age. The practice of this trade is still practiced. I mean, it started in AD 400, but things have changed, right? So there are people still practicing it to this day. So I may find some glass out of a house that someone commissioned, say, in the 1990s. I would hope I can tell if it is really old painted stained glass. Certain paint was used in the Victorian period, which is not allowed anymore. So, for instance, arsenic was used, lead was used in paint. I mean, I would hope by now I can tell the difference between something that's genuinely Victorian and something that was done last week. That's not to say something that was done last week, the person who's done it isn't any less talented or what have you. They just don't have access to the same materials. But they are learning. The people who I commission, because I also arrange for new things to be made, they have all been apprenticed. So this skill has been passed down over centuries even.
This is so interesting to me. Devyn, you're starting along this endeavor as well. Do you want to share a minute what you've been working on or what your plan is?
Sure. I've been interested in learning to do stained glass as a hobby. So I actually just acquired an entire stained glass studio from a gentleman who's retiring from doing it after 35 years. And so for a fraction of what it would actually cost to purchase all the equipment, I have basically everything I need to start making stained glass. And so now I'm going to be learning it.
That is really impressive, Devyn, that you've just taken on a whole studio. I mean, it might surprise you to know I have never touched a soldering iron in my life, and I have no intention of ever doing so. Like we were saying earlier, Stacey, when you're self-employed, anything you do takes so much time. All my time is, I mean, I'm a dealer of people go to my website, leadedstainedglass.com, and sometimes they assume I make this stuff, which is kind of a compliment in a way. But all my time is spent marketing this stuff, or acquiring it, processing it, and shipping it around the world. You know, there's no time for me to actually get involved in making it, and I'm such a perfectionist. I wouldn't be happy anyway. So.
It's my understanding that you used to restore windows for customers, but now you do spend your time in this business instead. And I'm curious, why is that? And I would love to hear more about how you got started with your business.
Right. Well, just to say, I didn't actually restore it myself. I would arrange for someone else to do it.
Okay. All right.
After a while, so, I mean, that was something We can still do that sometimes, but it has to really be worth it, because if you're going to take apart somebody's old window, take apart the lead structure, completely re-lead it, it's really got to be worth your time and the person's time who you're commissioning to do that. Anyway, how did I actually start? I was down at my local dump one day, although they would prefer us to call it the recycling centre, probably. This was about 10 years ago in Harrow, and somebody was just throwing out a complete set of stained glass window sashes. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to take that. I'm going to have it all. I wasn't thinking of money or anything. I just thought, this isn't right. So I managed to rescue most of them, put them in my boot, or the trunk, as you would call it.
Words are nicer in the UK.
Yeah, well, someone told me you don't put, boot is something you put on your foot. Anyway, so I managed to get it all in my little car, in my boot. And I took it home, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to sell it. I put it on a classified listing, and yeah, it sold. And it just went from there. I always wanted to be someone who buys and sells things. I never knew what. And it was from that day, actually. It all started from there. And then neighbours, when they started mutilating their houses with plastic toy windows, I thought, well, I might as well, I'll help you out there. I'll take that off your hands. And I started selling those. And then, so that was a hobby for about 5 years. I just got obsessed with this. And one day I decided to chuck in my well-paid professional job, which had a pension and sick pay, holiday pay and everything. And I now just about scratch a living doing this.
That's amazing. What a great story.
It really is.
I'm an avid trash picker myself. I think, Devyn, I think I told you the story, but I don't know that I've told it on the podcast before. But I'm also an avid runner, and I was out running the other day with my friend, and it was trash day on one of the streets. And as I'm running by, and we're doing intervals, which means we run really fast for a short period of time, and then we run slow. And during our rest period, I'm running by, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this giant, what looks to be a plaster medallion that goes on a ceiling underneath a light. And I'm thinking, oh, I bet that's just, PVC or foam or something. It can't be real. And so we get a little bit farther down the road, and I said to my friend, I got to turn around and see if that's real. We have to turn around. So we'd run, we turn around, truck back to there. And sure enough, it was a completely intact original plaster medallion that somebody was tossing out in their trash heap for the trash truck to pick up. And I thought, I can't let this go. So we ran over to my friend's house, got his car, drove it back, put it in his boot, or as we call it, the trunk. And now it lives at my house. It does not have a place in my house, but by golly, it doesn't live in the landfill right now either.
I think they refer to those as a ceiling rose in the UK.
Oh, right. Now I know what you're talking about. Yeah, sorry.
Oh.
And that's the thing. Sometimes when I go for collections, people offer me all sorts of things, like sort of ceiling roses, fireplaces, but window glass is compact. People ask me, why don't you deal in antique furniture and all this sort of stuff? But window glass, although it is obviously a volatile material, it is compact, which makes it good for shipping. Why I just stick to it, I suppose. But there are so many different types of old stained glass patterns and the glass that it maintains my interest. I've never been interested in anything else.
We've been talking about your website, and we'll list it in the show notes. We'll mention it again before this episode is over, but real quickly, it's leadedstainedglass.com.
That's right.
You have talked about finding all these windows, and I am wondering, do you have a favorite type of glass or window to find? I mean, is there one kind that's hard for you to let go of?
Do you know what, Stacey? A lot of my favourites are actually those which aren't stained, which don't have colour in them. And maybe that's how I could talk about the difference between American stained glass and British.
Oh, let's do.
Let's talk about, on your previous episode, you had Leanne, who had a great big window. Now, one of the differences with our domestic stained glass is that there will be a break in colour. Whereas Leanne's was just full of, there's no break in colour, is it? It's just loads and loads of colour going on. So typically, our window panels will have background glass, which will mean it won't have colour in it. But in the middle, there will be a coloured pattern. So it could be a rose or something, or it could be a geometric design, Art Deco or something. So there will always be that contrast. But sometimes we have, as I say, leaded lights which don't have any colour in them, but the texture is what catches your eye, because when there's no colour, it's like the sun just catches the texture, sparkles. I mean, this isn't going to mean anything to you, but there's a particular type of glass called glister glass, which is made up of tiny little pyramids of glass which stick out from the glass on one side. That was made in most of the 20th century up until the 1960s, and people are still searching for it now.
Can you spell that?
Yeah, glister, Glistre.
We'll try to find something about that and put it in the show notes. I'm interested.
I could send it to you, yeah. Some of my favourite glass is it's not coloured. And the other difference between American and British is that the glass you use is usually opalescent. So that means obviously the light comes through it, but you can't see through it. And typically, especially in Leanne's window, the colour is all streaky. So that's the main difference.
The UK glass, I've noticed, tends to just be more solid color. There may be texture, but it's more of a single color per piece of glass that you can see through versus the opaque swirls that we have here.
Yeah, exactly it, Devyn. Yeah, that's exactly it.
They're both beautiful for very different reasons.
Yeah, I'm not saying, I don't want to come across as the snotty English person who, oh, we've got all the culture here, and it is just a different technique.
No, I did not get that feeling at all. And I find it very interesting to find the differences. We're using, Leanne, you're probably listening, hopefully. And if you are, we love your window. But it is really nice to have that example. And that episode, I can't remember the number of that episode, but anyway, she talked about Flow Blue and her glass windows. And there are pictures on those show notes. So if you are listening and you want to refer back to the windows that we're talking about now, be sure and check out our website, True Tales from Old Houses, because you'll be able to get a better picture. And actually, on the show notes for today's episode, we could also just repost that picture and kind of do a side-by-side for you. That'd be cool.
That was episode 36, by the way.
Oh, thank you. You're good at that. I'm like, episode something. Devyn remembers. He's good at that.
No, I don't remember. I just have my notes up on the screen.
Oh, okay.
And another thing, well, actually, I'd be interested if you would correct me if I'm wrong, but the other difference between our domestic stained glass is that when you had stained glass in houses like Leanne's, it would only be in big, expensive houses. Am I right?
You're right in that the really beautiful windows like Leanne's were in more expensive middle class towards upper middle class and above homes. But a lot of very simple homes for just the regular folks would have like one or two small windows. Often like on either side of a fireplace, they would have like two square windows up higher up on the wall. And those would be like accent windows. And that would have been for just regular middle class, typical homes especially through the 1920s. But one of the differences is that stained glass in the UK was popular well into the 60s, whereas in America, stained glass pretty much fell out of favor by the 1920s. In the 1920s it was popular, but when the Depression hit in the 30s, most construction stopped, and then suddenly everything shifted, and the way they built things shifted, and they stopped doing it. And if you look at old Sears catalogs from the turn of the century, they had stained glass windows that they sold by the square foot, and they were ridiculously cheap. It's crazy how inexpensive they were. But, as we all know, the cost of labor came in and rose, and it got to be too expensive.
In the Midwest, where I spent part of my life, it's easy to find examples on either coast here in the United States, West Coast, East Coast. But in the Midwest, it was pretty common to have an extremely modest house, very small, or a farmhouse that might have had a more English-looking stained glass at that. Like Leanne's example is incredibly intricate, but I lived in a house that had colored panes and a top sash in one window, and they looked very much like something you would find in England versus something fancy.
Well, I don't know if it'd be interesting for me to tell you what a typical house where I get these from would look like.
Oh, yes, please do.
Especially that there was a particular boom in the 1920s and 30s housing in Britain. And what we were building is what we call 3-bed semis, which is a single building split in two. Each house, each home would have 3 bedrooms at the top. Each home, each of these 2 homes, would have a big bay window on each level. And in the top section of these bay windows is usually where the stained glass would be. What we call, another trade term is we call them top lights. And these are averagely sized. I've worked out them in inches because I can't think in inches.
Well, we certainly can't think in centimeters, so thank you.
But my website has got a conversion tool, so people can.
Excellent.
Anyway, these top lights would typically be in the size 20 by 24 inches. So as I say, so you do the maths. In each bay window, there would be at least 7 of these. So that's 14. It's nearly at least 30 of these stained glass windows, little ones per house. And then, depending on when the house was commissioned, what the owner decided they wanted, there could be another set around the door. So that's why we've had so much that we've been either throwing away in landfill, or those of us who are savvy enough have been shipping it around the world. But as I say, our houses were smaller. I mean, everything in the UK, I guess, is smaller in many ways. But we had more stained glass in our houses. It wasn't really, I don't think, by the 1920s, I don't think it even became regarded as an art form. It was just a standard part of the architecture.
Right.
Whereas I think, especially, again, going back to Leanne's example, that was a statement piece, and that would have been probably the only piece in the house. Again, you correct me if I'm wrong, maybe there were a little bits, but that was just so big. But whereas with ours, there would be, the pattern would have a continuing theme around the house.
Interestingly, Leanne, on Leanne's window, is that it was probably out of a catalog. There were a lot of manufacturers that would make these window units, and they'd be in a catalog, and the builder would just order that one.
That's exactly what we had as well, actually. Even now, I occasionally see in classified listings these old vintage catalogues from leaded light makers selling the patterns, like you inferred, Devyn. So the house owner in the 1920s could commission a design that they wanted.
This is fascinating to me. I am learning so much.
It is. And the thing is, Stacey, most people my age don't even realise this is what houses had. They've grown up seeing all this rubbish.
Yeah.
One of my Texan customers says we should call PVC by its true name, because it actually stands for, and I've written this down because I wouldn't have remembered it, it stands for polyvinyl chloride colloquial. But we should call it by its true name, which is putrid vicious crap.
I agree.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, 100%. So you were calling them plastic, were you saying plastic toy windows? TOY, plastic toy windows? Or what were you calling them?
Yeah, I call them toy windows because they have this sort of ghastly mechanism built within the plastic, which eventually seizes up. And you can never properly open, they're smaller anyway because they've got all this mechanical stuff within them. You can never open a plastic window properly. You always find there isn't as much space as a traditional wooden window, because a traditional wooden window will just have, just simple hinges on. You can open it as far as you like, Sorry, anyway, I could get carried away. I shouldn't be negative. Let's talk of the positive.
It's okay. I inherited plastic windows in my house, and I'm looking forward to the day when I can replace them with real wood windows. When my house was built, stained glass wasn't common, so I won't be putting stained glass in my front windows because it wouldn't look right.
Well, absolutely, Devyn. And some people say to me, they look at my house and they say, oh, you haven't got any stained glass. I actually have. If you look very carefully, they're just very subtle diamonds. There's a little red within the pattern. But some houses were made very cheap, so they didn't have an intricate design. I would never dream of changing it all to something just because I didn't in stained glass. I've kept my house looking as it would have done originally.
Well, I I think, I mean, we do kind of go negative sometimes when we're talking about windows, and people get stuck. They buy their house, they get what they get. I also like to think that on this show that we are passionate about our topic, and we bring people on who are also passionate about their topic. So
I'll tell you what I think it is. You might find this interesting. What we in Britain have in common with the USA is we are obsessed with home ownership. That is in contrast to the rest of Europe. Okay. And I think with home ownership, because we're obsessed with home ownership, and I say that while increasing section of our society are never going to be able to afford to own their own homes, and I guess that's the same in the States. But nonetheless,
Yes.
we are obsessed with we've got to have that mortgage, whereas you drive into mainland Europe, and I'm talking about not Scandinavia because it's really cold there, so they're obsessed with their triple glazing modern stuff. You drive through parts of France, Italy, it could be the early Victorian period because they've still got their wooden shutters. Drive through these little villages, you won't see any plastic. And I think that's because they've got a rental culture there. You know, some people will rent a house for their life, won't they? And they've got long leasehold arrangements and things. And I hate to say this phrase, it's really embarrassing. We have a phrase here, I don't know if you've heard it, called "an Englishman's house is his castle," which I think is ridiculous.
we have a variation of that.
Like a lot of patriotic sayings, it's meaningless, but it makes you see reality in a different way. So, you know, people want to make their little castles. They've saved up all this money to buy a house. And I don't know if you have this phrase, they want to put their stamp on it. Do you have that phrase?
Yes, we do.
Sometimes I want to tell people what they might do with that stamp. But anyway. But people want to put their own stamp on it. So they want to do something quickly. And someone tells them, in a day, we can just rip out these original features out of your home and put something in which is going to look sparkly, you know. But yeah, the plastic fades after a while. It loses that sparkle.
One of our biggest challenges here, which is not just unique to Philadelphia, is the house flippers, where, you know, our housing stock in my neighborhood is around 150 plus years old, and they've already been renovated at least once, sometimes twice. But a lot of times, an investor will buy a property for next to nothing because it's in terrible shape.
Yeah,
they'll gut it. They'll put a brand new interior and a 160-year-old shell.
Yeah,
and then they can get a really good price for it. Everything's quote unquote brand new, but it's all plastic. And it, you know, I've talked many times about engineered floors and pot lights and sheetrock.
But we're the same. We've got housing developers. I mean, yeah, people who will just buy a house and they use this phrase, they're going to do it up, which is your equivalent to you're going to fix it up. You know, our countries, this mentality is so similar.
Before we wrap up for the day, we could quickly talk about what people do with these pieces that you ship. I'm really curious. I know you have a section on your website, leadedstainedglass.com, where you highlight the projects that people do with your products. But I'm curious. I mean, do you have an idea for these when you let them go, or you just send them on their way and hope for the best?
I'm really glad you asked me that, because I find this the most interesting part of what I do, actually. People, I mean, I've no idea what people are going to do with them often, but I have a portfolio on my website which shows me what they've done with them. And for example, in Virginia, Tara has put a whole set out on her porch hanging. So she's using them as sun catchers. In fact, I'd say there's only a small percentage of people will actually reuse them as external windows. I've got this amazing photo of, Carla sent me this photo from North Carolina of her living room. She's got modern interiors with super slick linear features. And on either side of her smart fireplace are my tatty old rustic window sashes. And I know she's done it because it's just for the contrast, you know. And yeah, people will often use them for internal wall partitions. I'd say that's the most common reuse. It just makes a change from putting up a picture, really. It just lets a bit of internal light flow through your divided room. Someone's used them as a coffee table. Oh, I must say hello to one of my regular customers, Lewis from Tennessee. He's been buying from me for about 4 years. Buy a little something every month. He's retired civil engineer, I think. So he's very creative, and he'll do things like he'll take the windows apart, he'll make lanterns out of them.
Wow.
He hangs them in front of his vinyl windows. In fact, that's what a lot of people do. They hang them in front of their vinyl windows just so that the eye has some sort of distraction. So again, if you go to my website, there's a section on the main menu called Inspiration. When you go in there, you'll find a whole portfolio of... So I never know exactly what they're going to do until they send me the photos, but it's always a joy when they do. Because it's just so satisfying to know that I've rescued that from one side of the world and I've made sure it's got a new home on the other side of the world. It's just an amazing feeling. And the piece will outlast me and its owner, I'm sure, because it's glass. It's gonna, as long as it's not smashed, it'll last for centuries, won't it? Even if a new frame has to be made and it has to be completely re-leaded, that glass is unique. That was patented. You know, the rollers that made that glass will never be completely replicated.
Do you have anything else you want to share with us or tell us, or that you would want our listeners to know about you?
I think I just wanted to one of the things I want to do is just compliment you and Devyn for what you're doing with this series, because, you know, in previous episodes, I know you've had guests on who have appeared on TV makeover shows. We have the same TV shows here in the UK. What I mean by that is there a distortion of how realistic it is to restore old buildings. But what you and Devyn do is you let your guests say exactly what they want. This isn't staged. And that's why I wanted to come on the show. I mean, I've been approached by the same sort of low budget TV shows here in England. You know, they're usually sort of daytime TV programs, you know, restore a house in an hour, something just completely ridiculous like that. So what's great is you let the guests say what they want, and there's follow-up information so people can really do their research, perhaps before they take on a project, which they shouldn't. Before they get their stamp out, maybe they'll think twice about what they're going to do with that stamp.
Right.
And I just also just say hello to a couple of people.
Of course, please do.
Some British people listening to this will know I'm no expert at all. I'm just someone who still does just find this stuff thrown out. But I rely on people in the trade, the leaded light making trade and the stained glass industry. So Pete Fletcher and David Morris, who gave me a few technical pointers for this interview.
Great.
Thank you. Oh, Stacey, I've just got a feeling we might have got ourselves tied in knots between the different types of stained glass at the beginning of the interview.
I think we went over it long enough.
Yeah.
When I listen to it again, I can confer with you and make sure that I understand if I still have questions. But I think the main points are there.
I would have known what stained glass really meant before I started dealing in it. And most British people don't really understand it either. As Rhonda was saying, she refers to it as art glass. I mean, that's fair enough. And then there's different techniques. There's also fused glass as well. You know, people generally just see glass with colour in it and they think, oh, you can say it's stained glass. That's fine.
Stained glass can be very broad. And, you know, in looking at me learning to do it, I find that there is the hobbyist type of stained glass, and then there's the fine art side. And there can be a fine line between hobbyist and fine arts. But when you look at it, you really do know one over the other.
You can tell when you've got suddenly a British stained glass window that you've commissioned and the lead lines are perfectly aligned, the soldering is so smooth, and the way the cement has been applied, and the technique, the recipe for making the cement that puts it all together is, it's not just about the glass, it's about how it's been structured.
You have a really sweet About Me page that highlights your personality and business on your website. It's wonderful. And I just want to encourage everyone to go to Richard's website to find out more about him.
The website, by the way, has been redesigned and it looks great. Leadedstainedglass.com. It's so much fun to just click through and look at the images. And I promise you, Richard, I will be buying a piece at some point.
Thank you. You don't have to, Devyn, but I've just actually, one other thing I'd like to say is it's not just a website selling you stuff. There are hundreds of pictures there, which are my archive of sold pieces. No design is ever the same. They're all unique. Up to 100 years ago, somebody produced these, and I kind of like to be the custodian of the design, maybe. But it's not just about selling. There's all sorts of ideas there. There's case studies, what people have done. I think, you might find it interesting.
It's really an archive, actually, of images of the different styles of stained glass, and it's always great to refer back to.
So this has been wonderful to have you here. I just appreciate it so much. Thank you. Thank you for the compliments about the podcast, too.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
I'll talk to you later. Bye. Usually at this point in the show, we sort of go to the outro and you hear the music and we're gone. But Devyn, you have a little something that you need to share with our audience today before we wrap.
I do. Before we sign off, I do have some news to share with the audience. We're going to be wrapping up season 4 this next month in December. And I've made the difficult decision to step down as co-host after this season. Doing this podcast with Stacy has been a lot of fun. It's been very rewarding. And as an introvert, it's definitely allowed me to step outside of my comfort zone in a good way. So I'm not leaving because of Stacy or the show or anything like that at all. So I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. The reason I'm leaving is because a very big part of moving from New York City to Philadelphia was to allow me to pursue my creative self. A part of me that I had kept on the back burner my entire adult life. I've been given the opportunity to pursue my art, and I learn about what I want to do with art. I've been given this chance in our house to have space to do the work and the time. And as much as I love doing this podcast, I've allowed it to kind of get in the way and be a bit of a distraction from me actually pursuing what I really want to do. And so it has nothing to do with the podcast. It's just in my heart, all of my life, I wanted to pursue art and creative things, and I have never given myself the chance to do it. So that's really a bottom line what it comes down to. So I just need to give myself the chance to pursue the creative self.
Yeah. Well, I've had a few weeks to get used to this idea, and I still don't like it. But that's only because for selfish reasons. And I've so enjoyed being or co-hosting with you and getting to know you. And I know that, artists got to art. And I think
that's right.
It's important for you to pursue those things and do what is your passion. This show will remain my passion. You get to go do your passion. And that's what life's all about. Well, I should say that's what part of life is all about. Yeah. Well, thank you. And I am going to really miss you, but we do have you for 3 more episodes after this one.
That's right.
Just because we're not co-hosts anymore after that doesn't mean we aren't friends.
And I'm not stepping away entirely from my responsibilities around True Tales. I will definitely be around for consulting, and maybe I'll jump in and co-host once in a while too.
Sure. That'd be great. We'll love it. Okay. Well, now we better do the real deal sign off.
For more information about this episode, including show notes and transcripts, and to reserve your True Tales merchandise, t-shirts and hoodies, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com. And remember, November 16th is the last day to reserve your merch. Don't miss it.
Until next time.
Bye for now.